2025, USCIS may be going back to conducting interviews in marriage green card cases. In today's video, we're going to talk about some common questions that USCIS officers tend to ask. Hi guys, my name is Ksenia. I make videos for people who are going through the family immigration process. I'm not an attorney. My videos are based on public information, my own experience, and the experience of my subscribers, and the purpose of my channel is to give you guys the confidence to go through this process completely on your own. First of all, every USCIS officer is different, but most green card interviews are conducted in a more of a conversational style. So most of the time, unless you are in a Stokes interview, USCIS officers tend to slip a lot of the questions about your relationship, about your marriage, while they're having a conversation with you. So I divided up the common interview questions into 6 main categories. USCIS officers will typically ask questions about people and names in your life, important dates, places, finances, routines, and additional miscellaneous information. So first of all, a USCIS officer may ask each of you to say your spouse's full legal name, and in some instances they will even ask you to spell it out, especially if you're married to the kind of spouse who has a somewhat of a difficult name to pronounce or spell. Next, they might ask if your spouse has ever used any other names in the past, names of your in-laws and other relatives, your children if you had children prior to marrying your spouse. They might also ask the ages and sometimes dates of birth of these children and stepchildren. In some cases, they might also ask the name of your spouse's ex-spouse. They may also ask about people who have attended the wedding. How many people attended your wedding? Or they can also ask for the names of your witnesses that are listed on your marriage certificate. Now let's talk about dates. One of the most common and most definite questions that you will get at your green card interview is to say your spouse's date of birth. They may also ask for your children's dates of birth. Even if you are both the biological parents of the children born during your marriage, they may ask each of you to say their birthdays and ages. They will ask you for the date of your marriage, and they are asking for the actual date listed on your marriage certificate. When did you first meet, or when did you have your first date? Perhaps at least a month and a year when you had your first date. How many years you have been together? If you had any prior marriages, they may ask you for the date of your divorce or when that marriage legally ended, and they may also ask the same thing from your spouse if they know approximately when you got your divorce or when your prior marriage ended. Sometimes, instead of dates, USCIS officers will ask for ages. For example, how old were you when you met? How old were you when you got married? How old was your spouse when you got married? How old were you each when you had children? Let's talk about places where you met and where you got married. They will also ask you where your spouse is from, and sometimes if it is a foreign location, they will also ask you to spell the name of their hometown. They can also ask you the places where you have lived together in the past, so it could be addresses if it is within the same state, or it could be states where you have lived together, or it could even be countries where you have lived together, all depending on the history you provided in your applications. They can also ask you the trips that you have taken together. How many countries have you been to together? Where are some of your favorite places to go? And where are you planning to travel after you get your green card? They may also ask about what does your home look like, whether you live in an apartment or a house, whether you rent or own, the number of rooms and floors you have in your house, what color are the walls in the apartment, do you have curtains? So these kinds of more specific questions about your home may be something that occurs during a Stokes interview. Even if you didn't meet in college or university, they may still ask you to remember where your spouse attended a college or a university. They can also equally ask them, where does your spouse work? They may also ask about the relatives of your spouse and where do they currently live. Now let's talk about finances. A USCIS officer may ask you if you file your taxes jointly or if most recently you have filed your taxes jointly. Name of your joint bank account, who pays what kinds of bills, or who is the main budgeter in the house. The name of your insurance company. They can also ask you about some important or large purchases that you have made together. That could be maybe you bought a bed, or maybe you bought a TV, or maybe you spent that money on renovating your home. How much is the rent that you currently pay, or how much is your mortgage? Who paid the immigration fees? They may ask questions about the transaction history that you have submitted via the bank account, or maybe you showed them transaction history on Zelle or Venmo. Sometimes spouses are not able to add each other on a lease or a mortgage, but another spouse may regularly still send their portion of the rent or mortgage to the other spouse. In that case, when you are submitting transaction histories, you should ideally have a note in that transaction history saying what it is for. Maybe you're paying your spouse back for gas or internet bill or the phone bill. You also may want to be prepared to explain these regular transactions. Now let's talk about routines. These are the things that you and your spouse should know about each other because you live together. How many vehicles or cars you have, what are the makes and the models of those cars, what are the colors of those cars, who drives, who drove to the interview today, who cooks or cleans or does other chores. They may ask about who pays the bills, what time do you and your spouse go to work and get off work, what do you typically do on weekends, what does your weekend look like, what is your spouse's occupation and what is their salary, what side of the bed does your spouse sleep on, and some additional day-to-day life questions like what is the color of your spouse's toothbrush. But again, a lot of these very specific questions may be more likely to be asked at the Stokes interview. And USCIS officers tend to get more and more specific the more suspicious they get about your relationship. And finally, let's talk about the miscellaneous types of questions that they may ask. And here come some of the more tricky questions. They can ask you about how you met, where, when was your first date, who proposed and how, does your spouse have any criminal history? And this next question can be quite tricky because a USCIS officer may want to catch you in a fraudulent case by asking, why did you decide to get married? And what they're trying to get you to do is to slip up and say that we got married because I wanted to help my spouse get a green card. You should absolutely never say that in an interview because that will almost always result in a denial. You want to prove to USCIS that you got married for love. They may also ask you about some future plans, like we talked about, what are some places you want to visit after you get your green card, or even your future plans as close as the next weekend. Are there any big events that are coming up? What is your long-term plan? Do you want to buy a house? Do you want to have children? And do remember that there is no such thing as getting too personal during a marital green card interview. They may ask about your pets. What are the types of pets, their names, the color of this pet, any holiday plans, any past holidays. They may ask about your spouse's hobbies, each other's phone numbers, and one other question that USCIS officers may ask, especially during interviews where you had prior marriages, is, do you know why your spouse's prior marriage ended? So these are some of the more common questions that I have been able to find on the internet, and also questions that my subscribers have shared with me. So I hope that you found this video useful. Let me know about your green card interview experience. How did it go? What questions did they ask? Please comment that below. Like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I hope to see you guys in my next videos. Bye!